We've got Simon Pestridge here, VP of Marketing at Nike Greater China. Thank you for attending Social Media Matters today. First off, we've seen numerous highly creative campaigns from Nike, and even your presentation today, was very, very creative. What is that creative process that drives everything that Nike does?
It always starts with the consumer and understanding how you want to interact and talk with the consumer. Once you start from a really tight brief, you just let the creative process go. And the best creative process is a number of agencies working together,
with
a number of functions within Nike working together towards the same goal. Best ideas can come from anywhere, and then it's a matter of expanding and piling onto those ideas until you really find the campaign and the thought that's going to move the consumer into action.
Okay, so we saw in your presentation from the Nike's brand is about inspiring and
inspiration and innovation.
So we've seen from Nike's brand it's all about inspiration and innovation. How do you, obviously they're the core value of Nike's brand, but how do you feel you've translated that over the last 25 years to the consumer?
Well, I think we've always been a brand that prides itself on getting the consumer out and moving more than they thought they possibly could.
Okay.
So from the early years, our CEO and founder, Phil Knight, was very adamant that he didn't want advertising. He hated advertising. He said that repeatedly. And so at a time when a lot of companies were talking about their product, we were just talking about our brand and what the brand could do for you. We paid it off with great product, but it's always been at the heart that we think about how we inspire the consumer to get to a better life through sport than they currently have. And that's what our challenge is to keep that fresh. When we broke the mold with Just Do It 25 years ago, Just Do It today is just as relevant as it was then. Because it's always been reinterpreted. We've always given it a fresh tonality. Sometimes it's humorous, sometimes it's sad, sometimes it's provocative. But that gives you the ability to keep the inspiration going and make it really relevant to what's going on in the consumers' lives. And that's different in China than it is to North America, to London. And that again gives the brand dimension and vibrancy across the world.
Okay, do you think technology's played a part in that at all?
Technology's played a huge part in how the consumer interacts with the brand, but it doesn't play a big part in what your brand stands for. It's just the tools to how you deliver your brand promise change.
Okay. So in terms of, you talk about that kind of brand value. So obviously Nike has a very high brand equity. We know that from all the studies. How do you measure that brand value? What's the tangible asset that you can then translate into measurable business results, let's say?
I think one of the great things about Nike is, hey, there's an amazing business behind, let me start that one again. One of the great things about Nike is we work a lot on gut instinct. Don't mean we don't analyze decisions and all that kind of stuff, but when it comes to, especially a lot of our brand work, it's about, do we feel it? Do we really think it's going to move the consumer into action? And if you get that right, and you don't always get it right, but when you get it right, the business comes. And that's a really refreshing thing about senior management at Nike has been passed on through the years, I believe, is that when you get the brand right and you get the product right, business results come. And we keep driving forward to that. Yeah, we look country by country, or we soft on certain areas and this type of thing, but we fundamentally know what we need to do to keep moving the brand forward, to make it relevant in every country in which we do business.
Okay, so when you do it right, it really does pay off.
Absolutely.
So what happens when you do it wrong? How do you fix that?
A brand isn't made overnight. A brand is made over many years and many decades. So if you get something slightly wrong, the great thing today, as opposed to 25 years ago, 25 years ago, people would write in and tell you got it wrong. and then maybe after a couple of weeks you go, ooh, there's a groundswell going on here, which isn't right.
Right.
Today that happens within seconds, and so you know if you're going to get it right or wrong. So there's more pressure right now to make sure it's right. It doesn't mean you shy away from controversy or from stating your point of view, but you have to be probably more careful. But you can also react. At the same time, just because people react and have the means to react doesn't mean you were wrong.
Right.
It just means they disagree with your point of view. So knowing who you are and what you stand for is really, you just have to keep taking that to the consumer and have courage in your convictions.
Right, okay. So, we're here today at Social Media Matters. How has social media helped your brand engage better with consumers and deliver those results? And can you give us any examples of recent campaigns that you may have done?
Well, I think social media makes you sharper because you get that instant feedback, and you know if a consumer is reacting positively or negatively to the story you're telling. So I'll go back to August last year, 2012, where we did a social media campaign really trying to change the way people thought about greatness. Mm-hmm. We would post a comment on maybe somebody's performance or something that was happening, and it got a couple of hundred retweets. But then you looked at our reaction when we posted our thoughts and comments on Lu Zhang, and it got 125,000 retweets in a couple of hours. There you know immediately that you struck the right note and that people care. So then you start to look at, well, how are people talking about your subject matter? And that's important that they're talking about the subject you brought out, not just about the brand, because you're trying to change conversation, change the way people think about sport, in our case. And so you get that feedback mechanism, which is, as I said, is a lot more real time than it's ever been before. So that's probably the best example.
Okay, thank you. One final question before we finish up is, what's your view on the importance of balancing local and global content? Obviously, you have certain guidelines and things like that coming from HQ, but then you're marketing to a Chinese audience. How do you balance that?
I think it's a question that gets asked a lot, and I think a lot of brands, companies that I talk to do struggle with it. But to me, it's relatively simple. We're a great global brand, so you should never shy away from that. And the consumer in China or the UK or Australia loves the fact that you're a great global brand. What you have to do is be personally relevant in the market that you're working in. So if you do a global campaign in China, and you only do global campaigns, the consumer at some stage is going to go, do they actually know I exist? But at the right time, by infusing local creative, a point of view about sport in the local market, you really show that not only are you a great global brand, but you really care about what's going on in the consumers' lives. So finding that balance. If you swung the pendulum and you only did local work, maybe you'd be missing some of the power that is being a great global brand. So it's really our jobs as marketers in the market to strike that balance, to look at the work and be really, really open and say, okay, if you bring these two things together, that's going to create personal relevance for your brand in that country. And that's really what you have to do. Okay.
So do you have any advice for brands then who do face that challenge, where let's say the brand in one market is going to be is a lot stronger than it is in other markets, and even the brand at the global level itself may not be as strong as, let's say, Nike's? What kind of advice do you have for brands that have that kind of challenge in terms of balancing that local, global?
It always boils down to understanding your consumer, knowing where they are on the journey, and where you want to take them to. If you don't know that, you don't know whether global work or local work is going to do it. If you know it, you can start to create the map. But it's something that takes years and years and years. It's not done in a month or a season or a fiscal year. It's done over time. And you have to really keep going back and looking at what you're doing, how people are reacting to it, and are you on the path and the journey that you think you should be for that North Star you want to get to.
Okay. Thanks very much for joining us again, Simon. We look forward to seeing more of the great creative campaigns coming from Knight.
No worries.
Thank you.